What's up everybody, my name is Aztex, and today I have a deck build for you that's very important. A vanilla build. Hold up, don't click off the video. This is Terrian, World Tyrant. Now, the reason I'm building Terrian is not because he has any abilities. We are focusing on two specific things that are very important. One, we're going to focus on the typing, Dinosaur, Ooze. So cards that are going to focus on them being dinosaurs, and cards that are also going to be focused around oozes. That's going to be important. However, the next thing that's very important to consider is the 9/7 on the commander. Now, this may seem kind of stupid. Why would you build a commander with no ability? This is a very easy trap to fall in. If you were to build a commander like this one, no one's going to remove a normal commander. This is not simply a vanilla commander. We are actually going to be focusing on ooze cards. Now, ooze cards are actually important because they want to focus on other oozes. Also relies on counters to get bigger and hit your opponent. Oozewag, for example, actually has adapt and gives all modified creatures trample. So that is going to be very good. If while we are putting counters on our commander, we will also be giving him trample this way. And then things like Ochre Jelly actually enter in with counters anyway. And then when Ochre Jelly dies, you get to create another token with half of the amount of counters you had on it. It's going to be very good for attacking and getting off death triggers. But Corrosive Ooze actually gets rid of artifacts, and then all those pesky artifacts that have been giving you problems are actually all removed, and they're not targeted, so things that say hexproof will not work against it because they will all be sacrificed, not just one. While Bio Waste Blob actually pumps other oozes that you control, and if you control your commander, you may create a copy of Bio Waste Ooze, which is really fun, at the beginning of your turn. So you get to create an extra. They get +1/+1, so your commander is now at a +2/+2 if you have it on the battlefield. And then at the next turn, it's going to do it again. It's going to do it again. This card gets out of control very fast if it's not targeted. However, Predator Ooze has Indestructible, and whenever it attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. And if a creature were to die that was hit by this ooze, actually gives it an additional +1/+1 counter. So that is going to constantly be giving you another threat on the board so that you may swing in with a 9/7 to keep your opponent at bay. Now, I can't stress this enough. It is very important to be attacking and just allowing your oozes to do their thing. However, this deck is also Dinosaur. And a dinosaur that I think that fits this deck really well is actually Quake Strider Ceratops. Now, this may seem stupid now, but if you wait a little longer into this build, you'll understand where I'm coming from. This is a 12/8 vanilla, and it's kind of expensive, but it is a 12/8, so keep that in mind. And then you have things like Nyla's Forerunner. Now, Nyla's Forerunner actually just gives all creatures you control trample and has trample itself. Towering Might is actually really good because it enters with an indestructible counter on it and is an 8/8, which is super solid. However, you can remove that indestructible counter and put 8 +1/+1 counters on your creatures. Now that's really good for pumping your dinosaur, which is a 9/7. So whenever you're attacking, you can pump a ooze. Maybe you even want to pump an Ochre Jelly so that it has 8 more counters to put on it, and then you still have an 8/8 body at the end of the day. And then you have creatures like Iridescent Hornbeetle that actually benefits off of all of these counters. Now oozes want to give themselves counters. That's going to give you all kinds of creatures. However, if you want to really threaten somebody by putting a Iridescent Hornbeetle on the battlefield while your creatures are not only creating 1/1 counters for each other, creating extras of each other, but it will also create a 1/1 insect creature token for each +1/+1 counter that was put on it this turn. So this is a really solid card for oozes in general, but it's really good in this deck in particular. Sun's Avatar actually is really solid too, because whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you will gain life equal to its toughness. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of these creatures are bottom heavy. Well, your commander will actually heal you 7 when it enters for 5 mana, which is pretty good because you also get a 9/7 body. So that's kind of how the dinosaurs fit into all this. Now, to really understand the depth of this deck without thinking, oh, this is just some vanilla, this is how you really take advantage of your creatures. And if you think that this deck is very weak just because it has no abilities, you're dead wrong. Starting off with Ooze Garden, which is actually incredible for turning big creatures into oozes, like your Ceratops. Now, your Ceratops is a 12/8. However, when it dies, you create an ooze that is a 12/12. If you can drag that card out of your graveyard, which I have some in the build down below if you want to check that out, and then play him again, you can constantly be using this to get out 12/12 oozes, which is really good for this deck. And then you have Triumph of Ferocity. Now, this isn't the only card that does this to draw for power. I actually really like using Colossal Majesty. However, this is one that I don't see very often. If you have the highest power, you get to draw a card, which actually will allow you to constantly be using your commander and its counters to be drawing you cards. And a 9 base is hard to beat, so I would keep this in mind whenever playing this deck. Now, one with the Kami is actually going to be very interesting for this deck because it has flash. It's an enchantment that gets enchanted onto a creature, but whenever a creature you control dies, if it was modified, you get to create that many spirit tokens. So if you put a 1/1 on your Ceratops or your Ooze, you will be getting multiple spirit tokens. I mean, a shit ton of spirit tokens. So as you're sacrificing things to things like Ooze Garden, you will be gaining things with this card, a bunch. That's because these cards have some of the highest base powers in the game. Why? Because they don't have a ability. They have to be powerful somehow, and this is the way to do it. And then you can use a card like Strength of Cedars to actually swing in for a 1-hit KO. If you have your commander out and you attack, you put it on there, it's an instant. They think that they might live and hit them for a 1-hit KO. So this is a fucking awesome card to have with this deck because you will always have a back pocket plan. So if you are pumping your lands throughout the game, which I have a lot of land pump in this deck because a lot of things cost a lot, you will also be making your commander stronger without your opponent knowing and absolutely tear through an opponent's life. Also, it'll allow you to kill for commander damage, which is just 21. So very good card for this deck. And for the final card of this build before we get into the bonuses, Death's Presence. Death's Presence is my favorite card in this deck because whenever a creature dies, you get to put X 1/1 counters on a creature equal to that creature's power. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but a lot of the creatures in this deck have really big power, and this is a power matters deck. So anything you do that has large power or anything will be able to fuel this deck. I absolutely recommend Death's Presence. Now, if you have a little bit of dough in your pocket and you want to spend it on this deck because you think this deck is really cool, I recommend these 3 cards. So Biogenetic Ooze, actually, whenever it enters, you create a 2/2 Ooze token. So that's pretty good. And then at the beginning of your end step, put a 1/1 counter on each Ooze you control. Not 1, not 2, each of them. And then you get to pay 1 and 3 green and create a 2/2 green Ooze token. So this is actually a Ooze fest with this card. So I recommend this card if you want to be more Ooze heavy. Then you have Skullspore Nexus. And whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you get to create an XX fungus token equal to the power of that creature. So that's really good for allowing your Ceratops or your commander to die and getting things off of it. You're going to really benefit from having this in your deck. Last but not least, Primal Vigor. Go ahead and double up each thing that you get. You're going to double up your tokens. You're going to double up your counters. And if you bump up both your counters and your creatures, I don't think a deck that just focused on one or the other will be able to keep up with you because Oozes are focused on both and they excel in both. So if you're thinking to yourself, why would I build a vanilla commander? Why would I do that? And so with this, I leave you a Dinosaur Ooze tribal deck with a vanilla commander that is not a vanilla deck. Actually, I think one of my favorite decks I've ever built. I think this deck is fucking awesome. He's a fucking Ooze dinosaur. And if you read the flavor text, it's fucking cool too. If you decide that you want to see another one of my videos, check out one of these tribal decks. And if you don't want to see another build, check out one of these videos. Thank you guys so much for watching. Happy casting.